All right, those were two songs off of the Clash's London Calling album. We have another ticket winner, and now we have Josh from Extreme MMA joining us. There we go. Josh, can you hear it? Wait, hold on. All right, Josh, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm there.
All right, now you're on air now. All right,
very cool.
All right.
How's it going, Josh? It's Matt.
Going pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about where you're from, your website.
Yeah, I'm Josh Davis. I'm one of the administrators for www.facebook.com/Extreme MMA News. We're one of the smaller, but we believe we're one of the best mixed martial arts pages on Facebook today.
All right, and we could definitely vouch for it. We're both members of it. We both post actively on it. But you're going to talk to us today about the welterweight rankings because of the fallout from UFC on FX event, and we're going to talk about TRT too because that seemed to be a pretty big issue this week in sports.
Yeah, I kind of have one of those more controversial opinions, so I always love a good TRT talk.
All right, well, we'll just jump right into the TRT then. So, what's your controversial opinion on it?
Well, a lot of people look at TRT as a performance-enhancing drug. My personal opinion is that testosterone is a hormone that the male body produces, and it helps in rehabilitation and muscle growth. And oddly enough, I kind of agree with Chael Sonnen on this. Calling TRT a steroid treatment is like calling mouthwash alcohol. I see no problem with it whatsoever.
I agree with you there, but when their levels go far above the natural human body level, do you see a problem with that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. People who, for example, when Chris Cyborg, was linked to high testosterone levels and stuff, from steroid use, yeah, I definitely have a problem with that. When it's obvious that a competitor is attempting to get an unfair advantage, there's a serious problem. It risks the integrity of the sport. It takes away the gamesmanship. And, not only that, there's a reason that these rules are in place. But, from my understanding of, for example, the Chael Sonnen issue in regards to UFC 117, it seems to me that Chael Sonnen did nothing illegal. The thing that he had a problem with for Chael was that he didn't turn in the proper paperwork. And considering the vast number of fighters that have been linked to TRT, from Dan Henderson to Nate Marquardt, that they've turned in the proper paperwork and they were okay in California, Nevada, wherever. Randy Couture was hinted that he might be using TRT from a on-the-air broadcast from Joe Rogan. Of course, it was never validated, but the fact of the matter is that testosterone replacement therapy, which is, of course, what TRT is replacing something that as men get older, they're going to lose. I mean, you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. It's just the way it is. So I don't see any problem at all with replacing natural levels. Now, where you're sitting here increasing your levels to where you're, say, a 32-to-1 ratio, like what was found in Cyborg, there's a problem there, especially considering that Cyborg's a woman. That's a problem.
What about, did you see what Chael's levels were when he tested positive?
My understanding is that there was a false reading of 16-to-1 when the legal limit is 4-to-1. But that was only, from what I understand, that was the only test that he had that was outside the legal range. They gave him like 5 tests, and only one, the last one, was outside the legal range. So, I tend to go with the overwhelming results where he was in that 4-to-1 range, as opposed to that one erroneous test, in my view, that says he was a 16-to-1. So, yeah.
I just have a hard time arguing that. Well, I have a hard time believing that just for one test that they screwed up. I don't know. I feel like there's the possibility that he actually was doing it to get the advantage. If you look back throughout his career, he's been growing in size, rapidly, in between each event. You could go through, look back in his career, and he's grown at an unnatural rate.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but see, from that unnatural rate, I'd be more likely to suspect steroid abuse or human growth hormone, not testosterone. Because testosterone, even if you're at an unnatural level, it's not going to increase your body mass at that kind of a rate. So like I said, I mean, do I believe he's doing something illegal? He probably is. But do I believe the TRT is what it is that he is doing illegally? Nah, probably not.
All right. Do you want to just jump right into the welterweight rankings right now?
Oh, yeah, sure. After UFC on FX, was it 2?
Yeah, I think we got that covered. Then it was 2 at the beginning of the...
Yeah, I couldn't remember which event it was. But, Martin Kampmann, personally for me, he actually jumped into the top 10. I didn't have him in the top 10 before, But after, admittedly, he got his tail handed to him for 14 minutes. But in that 15th minute, there's a reason fights go more than 14 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
He caught Alves. Alves tapped. Game over. Kampmann won, and he showed that he's a world class fighter. He showed that he's ready to maybe take a step up in competition. Another guy's on my top 10. Jake Shields. I actually have Kampmann above him right now. I didn't before. I had Kampmann beating Shields in their match back at I think it was 133, or no, it was earlier than that. It was back before Shields fought GSP.
It was 121.
No, it was 131.
The Lesnar Kane.
What's that?
The Lesnar Kane card.
Yeah, exactly. November of was it 2010?
Yeah, I think it was 2010.
November 30th, I think. November 31st,
yeah,
30th?
Yeah.
Or October 31st.
Yeah,
October 31st.
It was Halloween.
Oh, okay.
It was the
I actually had Kampmann beating Shields in that fight. I was shocked at how I was one of the ones who was excited that Jake Shields was coming to the octagon. And I was shocked at how well Martin Kampmann handled him. I thought that if he had kept it standing instead of looking for the takedown and whatnot, I think he would have won it or possibly even knocked out Jake. So, actually at this moment I have Martin Kampmann higher than I have Jake Shields. And Alves, of course, I had him at 5th before, and losing to Martin Kampmann, who I didn't even have in the top 10, knocked him all the way down to 9 on my list.
What do you think about Alves going for the shot in the last minute there, when it seemed like he had Kampmann rocked? How do you feel about that?
I actually respect that more so than your boring laying prayers. I'd rather see a fighter go for the kill. To be completely honest, there's a reason that in the street, because back in the original UFCs, it was to mimic a street fight. We're not doing that now, but the fact of the matter is, in the street, if somebody has somebody rocking and is getting ready to put them away, they're not going to stand back and just watch them bleed. No, they're going to jump in and go for the kill. So I actually prefer an aggressive style. It's more fun to watch, and it can create situations like we had last Friday night, where you had the guy who's obviously rocked and then manages to come back and pull off a last minute submission. So it's a win some, lose some kind of strategy, but it's more entertaining. And in reality, fighters have their bills paid by the fans. Dana White can't cash a check if the money ain't coming in. And who pays the bills for the UFC? It's the fans. So I love that attitude where he went in and laid it all on the line, even though he did get caught in the submission.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. I like when they press the action as they keep going. But do you think it was like the smart decision to go for?
Well, was it the smart thing or was it the right thing? There's a difference there. The smart thing to do would have been to stand back and let him lay there, and not put himself at risk. But the fact of the matter is that I think Thiago Alves has that right mentality where he's like, who pays my bills? The fans pay my bills. If I had this guy rocked, I'm gonna go ahead and go for the kill. It's a risky situation at times, but I think he has the right attitude, going for the kill in the late rounds when he's obviously got the fight well in hand. But I can't think of any way to justify a situation where a fighter has another one rocked and just lets him lay there. I can't think of any situation that would justify that at all.
Okay. Could you just read us down your 1 to 10 right now for your welterweight?
Oh, for current?
Yeah, for your current one.
Well, I mean, of course, I got GSP at the top. I mean, the man's been out injured with a knee. You know, knee injuries are no fun, and it's understandable that he's taking some time off. You know, I've had trouble with my knees stemming from football injury. You know, so, but I still got GSP at the top. He's going to be at the top until somebody takes that top spot away from him. Of course, too, I got Condit, who's the interim champ. You know, he has earned that right. He's holding 12 pounds of gold. That is the only thing that anybody's going to touch for a while until GSP comes back. You know, I still haven't seen anything that said that Nate Diaz shouldn't be up there, so I got him at 3. Josh Koscheck, I actually had Josh Koscheck at 4th. You know, the fight with the GSP for the belt, you know, was rather a one-sided affair. But from what I've seen from Koscheck since, you know, he's, you know, improved his striking a little bit, you know, I as opposed to when he came out tough back in 2005, you know, I had him at 4th, you know, and I am interested to see what happens since he's changed camps and, you know, his left being trained by Javier Mendez, or I think it's Mendez is his name. You know, ever since he's left AKA, I'm really interested to see what's going to happen. Jake Ellenberger, I had him at 6th before, but obviously Alves got dropped, so he bumped up a spot to 5th. Actually, I see Ellenberger as the most dangerous threat in the welterweight division to GSP right now. I can't wait to see him get his shot, frankly, and I'm really hoping that Dana lets him fight Carlos Condit in a rematch. I really want to see that. Johnny Hendricks, I had him at 7 before. Obviously, I dropped Alves to 9, so he was putting my top 10 based on the stellar knockout of John Fitch. You know, Fitch hadn't been finished since God knows when. You know, and there was a time when he was tied for the record for the most wins consecutive in the UFC. You know, tied with Anderson Silva and Royce Gracie. So, you know, and of course Anderson broke it, but you know, John Fitch is a very tough dude. Very great game planner. Boring as all get out, but he has great game plans. Of course, like I said, Martin Kampman, I moved him up because there was no way I was leaving him outside the top 10 anymore. After that, like I said, it stunned me. I don't think he's a top 5 guy yet, but he's definitely not below the top 10. So I've got him plugged in at 7. Diego Sanchez comes in at 8 for me. Same place I had him before the Kampman-Alves fight because, you know, basically he's a tough dude. He still wins way more than he loses. And you know, I love his aggressive style and, you know, the way he goes for the kill. And I mean, I don't see any reason to take him outside of the top 10 based on, you know, the loss to Ellenberger, who's another top 10 fighter. Of course, Thiago Alves comes in at 9, dropped from 5 for me. And Jake Shields somehow was still holding on to my top 10 ranking. I'm still waiting on him to show me something in the UFC where he's anywhere near as impressive as he used to be when he was fighting for Dream or Shudo or Elite XC or Strikeforce even. You know, I was extremely impressed when he managed to beat Dan Henderson on the ground. I was extremely surprised. You know, I mean, and the Akiyama fight, it didn't really do enough for me to make me want to move him up, but it does solidify his position as a lower tier top 10 fighter. So I've got Jake Shields 10th.
I have Jake Shields around 7 just because of his performance when he did fight GSP. He actually did take a couple rounds from the champion, and I think I think if you give him a couple, like if that fight was longer, I think you might have been seeing a new welterweight champion. He wouldn't be nearly as dominant as GSP, but I think he might have beaten him that night.
I mean, it was an okay fight from a technical standpoint. I mean, obviously, Shields' striking is sloppy as can be. I mean, you know, I've rarely seen a display of striking that was that sloppy, except for maybe the Mayhem Miller Michael Bisping fight when, you know, Mayhem was taking a punch, but he wasn't, and he was throwing them, but they weren't pretty. It did not look good. I think that, you know, maybe if Jake had used better technique at fighting against GSP, maybe GSP would have wanted to go to the ground with him. And, you know, with Shields, the ground's his world. And if he was used a little bit more technique, he might would have made GSP want to take it to the ground. As it is right now, we don't know. You know, like I said, he lost to Ellenberger. He lost to GSP. I say he lost to Kampman. So in my view, he's only really won one fight in the UFC, and that was Yoshihiro Akiyama, who at the moment is 1-4 in the UFC. So, based on the Akiyama and the Cannon fights, I think he's a lower tier top 10 fighter. Like I said, I mean, I don't see him as a legit threat in the division right now. Maybe in a style-on-style matchup where he can actually get somebody to the ground who's not world champion judoka, like he was against Akiyama, But we still really haven't seen the full display of Shields' skills. I mean, he's been knocked out once and went to the decision 3 times. We really haven't seen the high level jiu-jitsu that he has.
I think it's tough for him too, because in the UFC everyone knows what he's gonna try and do. You'd be absolutely dumb to just try and take it to the ground and think that you have the better chance against beating Jake Shields on the ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, at the same time, I mean, look at Saturday Night Strikeforce card. Miesha Tate knew exactly what Ronda Rousey was going to do and couldn't stop her. And ended up having her elbow popped way out of socket because of it. I don't think it's the amount of knowing necessarily what your opponent's going to do. I think it's the more of ignoring what your opponent's going to do and focus on what you want to do. Royce Gracie, back in the early UFCs, a lot of the guys, in tournaments 2, 3, and 4, they knew he was going to try and get him to the ground and submit him, and they couldn't stop him. Not because, admittedly with Gracie, he, was taking everybody by surprise, and nobody knew how to defend it. But today, for the level of jiu-jitsu skills that Jake Shields really does have, and I mean, he out-wrestled Dan Henderson for 5 rounds. So I don't personally see where we can make an excuse for a guy based on, just because somebody knows what he's going to do, that he shouldn't work to get that. Now, admittedly, Yoshihiro Akiyama has fantastic takedown defense, but I mean, considering as if the man could take down Dan Henderson, that should have, meant that he could do something with Akiyama. I can't make an excuse for him based on people knowing what he's going to do. I mean, that's my opinion. The people are going to disagree with me, I know, but like I say, that's just how I see it.
Yeah, I think the women's MMA thing too on Saturday night is a little bit. I think it's more similar to the beginning of the MMA world, because right now the talent pool, as Dana White has always said, it is shallow, and I think the people I think Ronda Rousey is worlds ahead of Miesha Tate, and I think she's worlds ahead of anyone else in women's MMA right now. So I don't really think
she's a 2008 bronze medalist in the Olympics in judo. I mean that's a very high level of judo. Look at Dan Henderson. He has world class wrestling. But he went to the Olympics twice and didn't even medal.
Yeah.
Even though his wrestling is amazing, he couldn't medal. Chael Sonnen, I think he has the best wrestling in mixed martial arts today. He was an alternate for the Olympic team, couldn't even make the team, much less earn a medal. So to say that Ronda Rousey earned a bronze medal in judo at the 2008 Olympics, that says a lot. You know? But, the talent pool is shallow, but I've been following the WMMA for a while now, and I'm really looking forward to the Rousey Kaufman fight. I'm a huge fan of Sarah Kaufman. I think she's a the best way I can describe her is she's willing to take the punch to throw a few. And I love aggressive fighters. Whether it's Thiago Silva in the men's light heavyweight in the UFC, or whether it's Sarah Kaufman in the women's bantamweight in the Strikeforce. Aggressive fighters make for fun fights to watch.
Oh,
and first and foremost, whatever work I do with the page, I'm first and foremost a fan. So I like watching exciting fights. Even technical matches. I see things in technical matches that other people say is a boring fight. I wasn't bored in the GSP Shields fight. It was a great display of technical ability from GSP. Admittedly, it was a lot of jabs, but still, in the Sandon Koscheck fight, there was a lot of jabs, but he went out and had pretty really good technique and showed just how well-rounded he really is.
I think
for so long he's been doing the lay-and-pray thing. So, I enjoy the technical matches. I enjoy the crazy swing for the fences matches. Like I said, first and foremost, I'm a fan. So I want to see WMMA grow simply because the larger women's mixed martial arts gets, the more fights there are for a fan like me to watch.
Yeah, I think GSP, I think he just works really well. I think he's always a technical fighter. I think that when Ellenberger does come up to eventually challenge him, I think that Ellenberger might end up being a different Matt Serra. He's going to have the extremely good, like, the very high ground game that no one, like, really wants to go to the ground with him. The only thing that's going to be different is Ellenberger's ground game is a wrestling ground game, so it's not going to end as quickly if it goes to the ground the same way where Matt Serra was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he had the ability to finish you on the ground. I think it's going to be a very tough matchup for GSP if Ellenberger does come up and eventually challenge him. I don't think they should rush him into it, though.
Oh, I completely agree. They need to bring him along slowly. You know, like I said before, I really see Jake Ellenberger as one of the toughest tests for GSP in the welterweight division today. You know, just the way it stacks up. I don't see anybody giving him the fits that Jake Ellenberger is going to get him. And I'm really excited, you know, about Joe. You know, we have Jake the Juggernaut. We got Joe Excalibur Ellenberger, who I can't wait for this lightweight to come into the UFC. And by all accounts, I mean, he's better than his brother, and he's a lightweight. So I'd love to see his brother get into the lightweight division in the UFC. So, you know, but like I said, the Ellenberger guys, especially Jake, who's already in the UFC, I really think they're going to be a test at a very hard fight for anybody they come across. You know, I mean, like I said, Carlos Condit beat Ellenberger, but then again, Carlos Condit's finished 90-some-odd% of his fights. So that doesn't surprise me as much as it does some others.
Yeah, I don't know. One thing that I noticed in your welterweight rankings that someone dropped out. Did you drop Fitch from your welterweight rankings?
John Fitch?
Yeah.
I actually dropped him after the KO of Hendricks, funnily enough. Basically, I had him at a low top 5, you know, and I didn't even have Johnny Hendricks in it a few weeks ago. I thought he was a world-class wrestler with decent stand-up. You know, Johnny Hendricks is, I've said it for a very long time, that he's a great up-and-coming welterweight. But I just don't see John Fitch as a top 10 fighter because, you know, admittedly, he wins. He just wins. And I think that had he actually been able to show his wrestling in that fight against Johnny Hendricks, he probably would have won. But the fact of the matter is that he's a very one-dimensional fighter. You know, it's just one-dimensional fighters I don't get very excited about. You know, the sport is mixed martial arts. It's not, you know, wrestling. This isn't. He's not in the NCAA anymore. He's in the UFC, and he's got to polish his game. He's got to show some jiu-jitsu, and he's got to show some striking. You know, I actually, like I said, I dropped him out of the top 10 after the Hendricks fight because Hendricks catapulted himself into it based on that one KO. So, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of things about my opinions that people are going to disagree with, but, you know, I generally have a reason that a lot of people don't think about before I do it, you know?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, I don't even have Fitch in it today. He's not a top contender. I don't see him getting a rematch with GSP anytime soon. Frankly, I had BJ Penn winning their fight. So I think he's got to fight BJ and a whole lot of top guys before he can even come close to challenging for a belt again. Alrighty.
Well, we're going to wrap it up now, Josh, okay?
Oh, that's cool, man.
All right, do you want to hype the website one more time before we let you go?
Oh, yeah, you know, we got a great group of guys. You know, I think we're up to 680-some-odd fans now. We are, like I said, we are one of the best fan sites on the web today, Facebook or any other site, really. We go back and we authenticate everything we say. Because we want to provide the best experience for fans as absolutely possible. You know, the fact that we got, like I said, we got a great group of guys. You know, I've been with the page for several months now. Rob started it, I think, 6 months ago. You know. And, you know, then Matt joined up, and I joined up, and then Adam, our guy from England, he joined up. So, you know, I want to go ahead and give out a shout-out to those guys. They're a great group of guys to work with. And be on the lookout. We got some new exciting stuff in the works. You know, we're actually guys talking about investing in us, and we got a website, legit.com website dedicated to MMA news coming up. We're talking about starting a clothing line possibly with some backing from a friend of Rob's. So, you know, we got a lot of exciting stuff in the works, you know. And also, if you come and like our page, you know, we have the only MMA fantasy league that I know of on Facebook, you know. And I'm actually the one who runs that. So basically, you pick the winner, you pick the round he's going to win, and you pick your route of victory. and we score based on accuracy. So, and actually right now, Rob, the guy who started the page, he's actually our champ. So come on over and, try and give Rob a run for his money.
All right, Josh. Well, we'll see you later. I'll see you later today on the website, but we'll talk to you sometime soon. All right.
All right, man. Thanks so much for having me. And once again, I love your show. It's great. Keep on doing what you're doing, guys. It's great. And thanks again for having me.
No problem, man.
All right. See you, Josh.
All right, Josh.